Welcome to In the Margins, where we spark connection through stories. I'm your host, Laura Lynn Donahue, and each week I invite guests to step outside the lines and into the margins with me. You'll hear the untold stories, the stories of risk and reward, of triumph and trial, and everything in between. Thanks for joining me. Let's dive in. There are some stories that live in the tension of the margins between faith and doubt, duty and desire, belonging and exile. Today, I'm joined by Merritt, whose life moved from the pews of a fundamentalist church to the barracks of the Marine Corps, to the unexpected world of adult film, and then to the page as author of Secrets of a Gay Marine Porn Star, Code of Conduct, and Spiritual Probation. This isn't about labels. It's about what it costs and what it returns when we tell the truth about who we are. Welcome, Rich. I'm so glad to have you. And Rich, if you would give us a little bit of the background, the beginning of Rich in Greenville, South Carolina. We'd love to hear some of that from you.
I was born in Greenville, South Carolina. I grew up in a small town outside of Greenville, population, I think 1,400. My family, most of my aunts and uncles and cousins lived on the same street. And so I have very fond memories of the early part of it, hanging out at my grandparents' house, long summer evenings, eating watermelon, making homemade ice cream, chasing lightning bugs, things like that. So early on, I got that sense of belonging from them. As I grew older, that changed. My parents sent me to a Tabernacle Baptist kindergarten, which was, pretty strict Christian elementary school. They had some problems with that. So they sent me, after that, they sent me to a private school called Bob Jones Elementary School, which is on the campus of Bob Jones University.
Yeah, it's interesting. I started first grade at David Lipscomb University, or David Lipscomb in Nashville. I started there in first grade and went through my sophomore year in college.
That's interesting.
And so we have some similarities as far as fundamentalist background go. But what was your experience like at Bob Jones?
At first, what I remember was, so you have to remember these schools that we went to in the South were started for a very specific reason that I didn't realize at the time. The Supreme Court had gotten serious about integration. And at that point, it was the schools were going to integrate. And so rather than send their children to schools with Black students, parents, and my dad admitted this later in life, the reason they sent me there was because they didn't want me going to school with Black children.
Yeah.
And so all these white, they weren't whites only. They were, whenever someone says I went to a Christian school, a Christian school was really a whites only school. So partly because of that, I would hear the stories of my cousins who were always getting in fights at school. And I would think, oh, I'm so glad I go to this really nice Christian school because it's polite and it's gentle and it's courteous. And as a deeply closeted little gay boy, all that appealed to me.
Sure.
There were a lot of smiles, people dressed well. So all that phony artificiality I liked. It wasn't until growing up, getting my teenage years, and then in decades of therapy now, realizing how harmful that was to me.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say harmful because I have experienced something very similar, and not even realizing the damage that the legalism was doing, because what else did you know? You didn't know there was another side. You only knew what you were taught. I had my cousin who I was very close to. She called me recently and she said, I'm so sorry that you experienced that type of religious persecution, is what she called it. And I just thought, and you've probably had the same feeling maybe when you were first kind of coming out of the fog, that you just didn't realize all the negative tapes that just got embedded into your subconscious. And they, as much as you don't want them to come up anymore, they still can raise their heads. And it's, I think it's really hard to grapple with sometimes.
Well, Laura, you were probably like me. To teach children like us that hell is a real place where the vast majority of people we come to contact with their souls are going to writhe in agony in an eternal, non-consuming lake of fire. That's spiritual abuse. That's child abuse.
Yeah.
And I believed it. Unlike, the other kids, I don't know. I don't know what they were thinking, what they were believing. I internalized every bit of what that meant.
Yeah.
And to say that we're really supposed to go out and convert them so that they don't, but really, do these preachers really care about these other souls? I never got the sense they did. All they cared about was getting you into the church so they can control you in their form of patriarchy. But what does the planet matter if Jesus is just going to come back and destroy it anyway? All the ramifications of that. Yeah, it's amazing how it still creeps up occasionally.
It really does. And I have trouble now not seeing religion as a cult. It's very cultish, in my opinion. And I kind of have hesitated to say that in the past because, cult is, oh, we're not a cult. You get that pushback. But when you expect people to abide by certain rules and behave within a framework in a box or tick off the tasks and tick off the responsibilities and manners, and that's a cult. That's what cults do.
I was sitting in a freshman Bible course at Bob Jones University, and the lesson that day was on how to spot a cult. And they gave us a checklist, a charismatic authoritarian leader, a strict set of rules. And I'm like, wait a second, we're checking all these boxes here.
Yeah.
And other friends and I have that we've regrouped thanks partly to social media in the years since. We've all kind of found each other in the afterlife, as I call it, after leaving fundamentalism. That confirmed it for us. We were in a cult.
Yeah, absolutely. We even believed that we were the only ones going to heaven.
Yeah.
So I told my cousin, she was Presbyterian. She remembers me telling her that she wasn't going to heaven. And I just thought, what a terrible thing for me to say.
Like, how old were you when you said that to her?
So I would have been, anywhere up until probably high school.
Yeah. We were children and we were going up to people in New York City. They took us on a mission trip and we would go up to strangers on the street in Brooklyn and Queens and just say, excuse me, if you died tonight, do you know where you would spend eternity?
Yeah.
Someone asked me that in Georgia not long ago, a teenager like I was. And excuse me, mister, if you died today, do you know where you would go? And I said, yes, the crematorium.
Oh, yeah. You probably knocked them off their socks for a minute.
Yeah, they quietly walked away and I was avoided the rest of whatever that was.
Wow. I had a couple of people approach me when I was in Franklin, Tennessee a few weeks ago, and they came up to me. I was sitting down and actually I was getting ready to be on a podcast myself. And they said, ma'am, we were just wondering if we can pray for you today. Is there anything in specific? And I just thought, I can receive this because I know what you're doing in my head, but this is very awkward. And, who are you working for? Who has you out doing this? And I told them, pray for me to be on the podcast, and so that's what they did. But it was just unnerving in a sense. Me and my polite Southern attitude was very amenable, I guess, to what they were offering to me at the time.
Part of it's awkward is because I still recognize myself in that. Part of my past, like you said, you went to your cousin and told her she was going to hell. And I did that. And that child or that teenager coming up to me, I still, I'm like, wow, that was me. And look how awkward I made people. Getting past that is the work of a lifetime.
Yeah, I agree. Did you find that just the general perfectionism with your legalism just seeped into almost everything that you did?
Absolutely. Because, we talk about cults like they're a bad thing, but,
right.
My escape from the cult of Bob Jones University was to join another cult, the Marine Corps.
Right.
At least the Marine Corps, you get paid for being there. My platoon commander is when I became an officer and I went to the basic school at Quantico, Virginia, or just first reporting to active duty, my platoon commander there looked at my record and said, oh, you went to Bob Jones University. And I'm like, okay, how is that going to be received? And he just said, well, you'll do well here because you've been taught instant obedience, strict obedience to orders without question, and doing it to your absolute best. And he wasn't wrong. That part of my past, it had already helped me actually, because I enlisted in the Marine Corps and went to boot camp. And, other recruits are having trouble with that. Like, you tell me what to do and I do it without pushing back. I didn't have any problem with that.
Yeah.
So that form of perfectionism and legalism really helped. I liked having I liked knowing the rules, because as time went on, I could figure out how to get away with breaking them. And that was interesting later in life when I went into recovery for substance use disorder. But yeah, that perfectionism, it's vicious because it's such a paradox. It's the opposite of what it claims to be.
Yeah. It is. There's no freedom in it.
Mm-mm.
It's very much a jail. Trying to please others. It takes a lot of energy trying to control. I mean, it's control, right?
Right.
You're trying to control everyone's response to you. So you're doing what you think is going to bring the best response from the most people in the room when you're practicing perfectionism.
Yeah.
And I think even knowing someone who wasn't expecting perfectionism was still hard not to give it to them. I don't know if you ever get to that final answer, because it's always a work in progress. But tell me a little bit about when you went into the Marine Corps from Bob Jones. Did you go to college at Bob Jones, or did you do your military career to go to college later?
I joined the reserves. Interesting, you said you went to the Lipscomb University through your sophomore year. I went to Bob Jones University as a freshman, but then I stayed out to go to boot camp and my training school. And then I came back to the reserves, and I only lasted another year after being in the Marine Corps, that little bit. So I left Bob Jones at my sophomore year, finished my education at Clemson. And once I graduated from there, I'd gone to the officer commissioning program at Quantico in the summers. And so I went back for active duty training, and I spent 8 years on active duty after that.
Okay.
So I kind of did them at the same time. And then I got out of the Marines and joined another cult, the legal profession, became a lawyer, went to law school.
What type of law?
Well, now I do, I worked in Atlanta for a nonprofit, and same thing here in California. We provide all kinds of services for low-income people that can't otherwise afford an attorney. I focus on housing, helping lower-income people with eviction defense, subsidized housing defense, and things that they might need in that regard.
Yeah. Great. I'm sure that's hard work, but rewarding at times as well.
I have some colleagues that are coming right out of law school and going into it, and I really admire them. I wasn't emotionally or spiritually equipped for that. Psychologically, I had to try every other option, making money, never really succeeding there, always spending more than I made. And it wasn't until, I had some major life crises that I realized I can use this to help people, and that's the only thing that works for me.
That's good. You have to reframe it.
Yeah.
When it's, well, I didn't go to law school, but I did think about it.
You chose wisely.
My father was an attorney, and one of my brothers got his law degree. But I met my husband. I decided I would much rather get married than study.
That's a smart choice. Yeah. I applaud that.
Well, with the perfectionism, it makes school just a whole other ball game.
Yeah. I remember that.
I didn't want to take notes anymore. I didn't want to read anything else. I certainly didn't want to go to church anymore. I was so tired of going to church, reading the Bible and taking notes. And you went to church 2 or 3 times a week?
At least. I mean, we at Bob Jones, we had chapel every day.
Yep.
In the middle of the day, we had Bible class a couple times a week. We had soul winning and visitation on Thursday night. We had prayer meeting on Wednesday night. We had Sunday morning Sunday school, Sunday church service, Sunday night church. It was just nonstop.
Yeah. Very similar to me, but we had Bible class every day.
Okay. We alternated with gym, which, I thought I kind
of interesting.
Yeah. We had like Monday we would go to Bible class. Tuesday we would go to gym. I can't remember how, but it was like every other day like that.
So you have written your memoir was the first book that you had that came out. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. And what's the name of your memoir?
So my memoir is titled Secrets of a Gay Marine Porn Star, and it was published in 2005. Yeah, I think the title kind of says it all. It is
It
a
says it
memoir,
all, right?
not a novel.
It's funny because I was doing some practice and I was saying the names of your books. And I knew that if I tried to say it right now, I would stumble.
Yeah.
Just for no other reason than it's a mouthful and hard to, those words don't really go together.
I think even in the text of the memoir, and I haven't read it in a few years. There's a scene where I'm telling my best friend Gary about what's just happened to me. And we start riffing on, he's like, oh yeah, you should definitely write a book, and we start riffing on the title. I was a Bible thumping mental patient, porn star or something.
Yeah.
And as we had that conversation, I realized he's right. And so by the time I wrote the manuscript and took it to a publisher, it was Confessions of a Gay Marine Porn Star. But then she recommended I work with my friend Charles Casillo, who is a celebrity biographer. And I told Charles I wasn't quite comfortable with the title. And so he molded that into the final, what became Secrets of a Gay Marine Porn Star. And I just loved it. I said, that's it. Because it's kind of tongue in cheek, because there really aren't any secrets, thanks to the New York Times Magazine and The Advocate, which was a gay magazine at the time. They kind of revealed everything that was already a secret. So I wasn't really putting anything out there that the public didn't know.
Well, the Times cover was very interesting that you ended up being the solo unidentified person on the cover, much to your surprise.
I was surprised by the cover. I didn't expect that. By the time it came about, Jennifer Egan wrote the story back in 1998. They had wanted to focus on another Marine who was willing to have his face on the cover. And his name, I think, was Jeremy. I can still picture him. But at the last minute, he admitted he was being discharged for being HIV positive.
Wow.
And so the New York Times Magazine just completely backed away from I don't even know if he's even mentioned in the story.
Wow.
So they could, at the last minute, they could no longer use him. And we had taken the photographs the photographer, Matt Mahurin, came out to San Diego after the story was written. And that was the first inkling I had that, no, the story that was going to focus on Jeremy, it was now going to focus on me. Matt said it was me and my friends. And I thought, okay, as long as it's my friends, but it was really, it always come back to me as the storyteller. And, Jennifer does that incredibly well. She told that story that no one else had told at that time. Like, what is life really like in the military for people under Don't Ask, Don't Tell? And she brought out some incredible details even I hadn't thought about. As she came to my my battalion at Camp Pendleton, I just invited her up and she drove up and walked around and noticed how everyone else had photographs. And as she put it in the magazine, she said, crinkly faced infants. And on mine, it was just strictly military, nothing personal. I'm like, yeah, that's right. It's a poignant detail.
Yeah, it is. And I think you even mentioned that sparked a recognition of loneliness that you didn't really know you had.
Yeah, that's right. Wow, I've forgotten I'd written that somewhere. It was, because she talks about the title was Uniforms in the Closet. And she got that title from, I had friends at the time named Chris and Chris. They were a couple. One was in the Navy, one was in the Marine Corps. And we went over to their house. I think we did we did something at their house, and she saw their uniforms lined up. And that's where she got the idea for the title.
Okay.
But it was about how there was something in there about how I was constantly having to change. Like, I'm on base wearing the camouflage uniform, and then I go into town, into Hillcrest, the LGBT part of San Diego, and I dress a different way. And how we're constantly having to. Well, she actually, at one point, she called me a chameleon. And at the time, I took that as a compliment. I'm not sure that she meant it. But I saw it as, I'm able to change my skin in order to survive in whatever environment I find myself in. But that makes, I'm never really being fully myself to anybody. And that's very lonely.
That is very lonely. I agree. It's a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
I mean, changing.
It's exhausting. I don't realize it at the time. I've always liked hard work. I've had a job since I was, 14 years old, but that gets exhausting.
It's it's different. It's a different hard work with the mental and your mental capacity, your ability to relate to people, your ability to just be who you are.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of, well, I don't know how much self-control it takes anymore, because sometimes I feel like it just is so relegated, or has been so relegated into me, that it kind of comes out just easily. I just do the chameleon thing,
Yeah.
but I think the growth part is recognizing it, and then recognizing that you want to do something about it to get to the place of being more authentic.
Fortunately, going back to the cult word, it's interesting how, after being in the Marine Corps and after being in the legal profession, I did develop a drinking problem and a substance, use problem. And that led me finally to recovery. And in sobriety, we learn, I've had some very tough love teachers that have been kind and wonderful, but they rid me of a lot of that. They help, though you're not being authentic. You sound
Yeah.
phony. In fact, I even had a therapist a few months ago. I thought I said something so profound, and he just stopped and said, "Do you hear yourself? You sound like a Hallmark commercial." And I was like, "Oh, that's so true."
So I was interested in knowing, as you were growing up, you knew that you were different, so to speak, only because of certain things that people would say. Why are you hanging out with the girls? Why are you not with the boys? Are you a sissy? And I just wondered, how did that affect you? Did you think, well, maybe I am gay, or did that just not come up? I mean, it wasn't a time where we would have just said, "Oh, hey, you know what? I'm gay, and now I know what's going on." And everything was closed mouth.
Being gay wasn't something that you were, from my understanding. Being gay was something that you did.
Yeah, yeah.
And so the idea that I could actually be gay without committing a gay act was something I couldn't even comprehend. And I think that kind of goes to the world that we lived in, of this rigid Christian fundamentalism and legalism.
Yeah, you said being gay wasn't something you were, it was something you did,
Right.
which I would say that's what I was taught as well.
Yeah.
And it was also something that you could control.
Yeah. It was, sins were actions. That was the way I understood it then. You couldn't sin unless you had committed an act, that, as we were taught. And if I had never had
Right.
gay sex or acted on a gay impulse, then I couldn't be gay. I couldn't be homosexual. I couldn't have committed the sin of being gay. And that's just what I thought. And I carried that thought with me.
Yeah.
The idea would come to me. There was a point when I was 17, and I'd had crushes on my friends, and it, I, to the point where there was one friend, he's actually a preacher of a pretty big mega church in Greenville now. And
Okay.
we would go swimming together, and, in the summers, and I was having this thought life problem. That's what we called it. I had a thought life problem. I wasn't gay. I had a thought life problem.
Gotcha.
And I was on my way across the campus to talk to one of the deans, one of the deans I actually liked. And I was going to tell him I thought I might be having these thought life problems about this guy. And I just got this idea. I was walking across the campus, and there's a Bob Jones Sr. and Bob Jones Jr. and their wives are buried in the middle of that fountain on the front of campus. So I was literally walking past his grave, and it was like, I heard this voice, "Do right," which to me meant, that was one of his sayings, but to me it meant, you can do this on your own. And at that point, thank God I heard that, because I turned around and went back to school, back to my, I probably went home at that point because I think it was the end of the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the closest I ever came to thinking that I might be different in that way. But then as time went on, more and more people were, I was developing crushes on these guys, and
Yeah.
I was telling myself that I wasn't gay, but yet I was exhibiting really, affection. And of course it was one of those things where when I finally came out, it was just making it unanimous. Everyone at that point admitted I was gay because they all knew it, I think.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
once in a while, then like I would tell, when I've told my parents, my mom she couldn't believe it, but I'm like, really? How can, of all people, how can the mother not know?
Yeah. Yeah. So was that when you were in the Marines, that
Yeah.
you
When,
came out?
when I came out, I had, I was stationed overseas. I was in Okinawa, Japan.
Mm,
Um, I'd already actually hooked up sexually with a couple of guys at that point, but I was either drunk or I was experimenting. That was what I was telling myself.
sure.
And
Yeah.
then when I met this other lieutenant and we hooked up on base in Okinawa, at that point I was like, I can't really deny this anymore. And
Mm,
what I felt, and I was about to leave there to come back to the United States to Camp Pendleton in California. And I thought, this might be the perfect opportunity to explore what this is. And
yeah.
at that point, I've never looked back.
And so how did you tell your fundamentalist family?
That was in a letter, and it was I didn't want to tell them while I was in the Marine Corps because, what I was telling myself was, well, they'll worry about me, don't ask, don't tell was the law now. And even by telling them, if they wanted to tell the authorities, I could get kicked out of the military. So, but no, I was already out of the Marines because the New York Times Magazine had already happened.
Okay. Okay.
And I was anonymous in that, but then I got out of the Marines. I was discharged about 2 months later, just normal schedule, honorable
Yeah.
discharge. And then the Advocate was doing a story about who was this anonymous Marine, and they were going
Oh,
to
right.
name me. And I thought, well, at that point, it might get around and back to my parents. So I need to tell them. But I wrote them a letter and
Okay.
waited for them to call me, which they did. And, we had a very awkward conversation about it on the phone. And that was it. That was how I came
Yeah.
out to them.
And they didn't disown you.
No, they told me they loved me, or my father told me he loved me.
Mhm.
My mother was just crying in the background,
Yeah. Yeah.
wondering how I could choose to do this to her.
Yeah, it's interesting how our decisions make it about somebody else
Yeah.
when it's not. That happens. When you were in the Marine Corps and you were gay, you had a group of friends that were also gay, or they were heterosexual and gay, or I just wondered how you like maneuvered that situation, if you will,
Yeah.
especially with don't ask, don't tell, which I think some people thought was a good thing.
Yeah.
Maybe the people who weren't gay.
Well, Bill Clinton,
Yeah.
after the New York Times Magazine and I went to law school, one of my professors, my constitutional law professor, asked me to talk to the class about it.
Uh,
And I was explaining to her the way we lived and what happened. And at the end of it, she's like, no wonder Bill Clinton thinks don't ask, don't tell is a good idea. That's how he lives his own life.
mm,
And when
mm,
you're a powerful man like that, you can't. But when you're, rank and file, you can't. You've got to do all these things to cover it. And you're going to eventually
yeah.
slip. Like even like you talk all this talk about pronouns,
Yeah.
and people on the right making a big deal of it. I remember having long conversations with my gay friends on base, and we would
Mm,
switch all the pronouns to like the guys we were interested in. We would refer to them as she. That was just the way we lived our lives back then.
yes. Survival.
Yeah.
Well, I thought the story, of you being on the cover of Times Magazine, the way that all it seemed to just the story you appreciated the journalist and the way she told the story. Jennifer Egan, is that what you said?
She was a freelance writer. I mean, she's a pretty famous novelist now, and she was writing cover stories. She had written a few books back then, actually. Invisible Circus was one of them. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, she was the one who did the story.
And then it just seemed as though things snowballed as far as the pace of not just you coming out, but also there was a scandal, so to speak, or it was discovered that you were also a porn star.
Yeah, what happened was, so after Don't Ask, Don't Tell became the law, there's a whole industry in San Diego, at least there was back then,
Yeah.
and at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina,
Mm,
about getting these young Marines and soldiers into gay porn. Um, it would be convenient to say, well, I was lured into it. I wasn't lured into it. I went into it. I thought it would be fun and interesting. And a way to vent my anger about don't ask, don't tell. And it was money and it was all those things.
Mm-hmm.
I was 26, 27, and it seemed like a hot thing to do. So I did it.
Yeah.
I was in 8 pornographic videos, with a studio. I don't think it was in business anymore. But yeah, that was in San Diego. And I
Okay.
really stopped when I met someone for the first time and fell in love. And,
Okay.
he was like, I would really rather you not be doing this anymore. And I said, okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I stopped and started channeling my energy into writing. I had already written the manuscript that would become Code of Conduct, my first novel. I
Okay.
published my memoir first, but then second, we went back and dusted off the novel and published that. But there was a column in the Navy Times, the back page. It was called the back page or back talk or something. And they wanted active duty people to write anonymous op-ed pieces. So I
Okay.
wrote this one op-ed piece that said, "Don't ask, don't tell" should be repealed, and gay and lesbian service members should be allowed to serve openly.
Yeah.
And that caught the attention of an organization. And when the New York Times Magazine contacted them about doing the story, they put Jennifer in touch with me. And that's how she
Okay.
and I were connected. So we
Okay.
went through the magazine, and then the Advocate wanted to do a story about revealing who this person was. Well, after that story came out, someone who recognized me in the Advocate photographs called them and said, this guy's been in porn. And the Advocate called me. I reached out to one of the attorneys who I knew, and he advised me not to talk to them,
Hmm.
which at that point I probably could have because I was already off active duty.
Yeah.
But I didn't speak to them. And, when you don't talk to a reporter, basically they're going to write whatever story they want. I mean, they're going to write whatever story they want to anyway.
Yeah.
At the time I viewed the second Advocate story, the cover story that they did, the Marine who was in gay porn. I thought, oh, this is awful. This is horrible. It's slander. Well, it's not slander because it was true. So I
Yeah.
went back and read it recently, and I'm like, they just, they did what magazines do, which is report the facts.
Yeah.
Now they did have a second story about this psychoanalyst analyzing someone I've never talked to, doing a psychoanalysis of me and
Oh,
Bill Clinton,
wow.
because of a scandal with Monica Lewinsky, which I thought was very
Yeah.
strange, but that was their choice to
And not
publish that.
a side by side psychoanalysis?
Yeah.
Really? How interesting
It was
and weird.
bizarre. It was a strange time of my life to suddenly be in law school, first year of law school, which is hell on its own.
Yeah.
And then to be going through that was quite a lot.
Well, I feel like sometimes it's rarely just one thing. It's all the
Yeah.
things at once. And I know you said you were also at that time, were you also dealing with a substance abuse addiction,
I have
or
been,
was that later?
I've had a drinking problem since I started drinking. I never had a drink until I was 18.
Yep.
I've been taught that alcohol is of the devil. You just don't drink. And so when I joined the Marines and I started drinking with the Marines, then I really liked it. And, because it's basically self-medicating for all this
Yeah.
stuff from our childhood
Yeah.
we haven't dealt with. And I liked it a lot and found out, oh, this is the cure for all this emotional stuff. And it worked for a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
By the time I got out of the Marines, I already had a DUI. That's part of the reason I got out. I was already having some difficulty with, drinking too much and just not working anymore. And so once in the Marine Corps, we're always getting drug screened. We can drink as much as we want. That's okay, until it's a problem. But we can't even smoke pot. You test positive for marijuana, even they'll kick you out.
Yeah.
So I never did drugs. And it wasn't until I got out of the Marines and started using the party drugs and got hooked on those. And eventually, I've been clean and sober now for almost 7 years, and
Oh,
going
wow.
through recovery is what has helped me deal with a lot of these demons from the past.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the recovery community I always thought it was I did some recovery on the other side, dealing with a family member who
Yeah.
had a drug problem. And what am I trying to say?
Al-Anon.
Al-Anon. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Thank you. That's what was just escaping me. And I found some solace there because I realized that I wasn't the only one dealing with, my very similar circumstances.
Yeah.
And while I was in Al-Anon, I read a book by a Franciscan priest,
Richard
Richard
Rohr.
Rohr.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Did you Breathing Underwater?
I've read Breathing Underwater every morning. Just this morning, I read every morning. I have a goal of starting out with his daily meditations. Yeah, he's pretty amazing.
Boy, he is
Yeah.
amazing. He and Richard Nowen, I
Okay.
think,
Yeah.
saved me. Well, so Nowen is Rohr's mentor, or
Okay.
Nowen has passed away, but
Okay.
he's the one that taught me about being beloved,
Yeah.
period.
Yeah. It's interesting that what I read this morning said, Richard Rohr wrote that sin, it isn't what we do. It's the illusion of being separated from the divine.
Mm.
And it's so opposite of what we were taught as children. We're not
Yeah.
separate. Liberation is, we are liberated. We are one with the divine. And the
Yeah.
process of liberation is coming to understand that. And that's what the whole thing in the Garden of Eden was about, was taking that fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, was the human race. Most religions, other religions get this better than Christianity does. That moment was separating, as Rohr teaches, into dualism. And Rohr is all about at one-ment, atonement, understanding we are at one with the divine. And it's through recovery that has really helped me to see that. And not, it's been an interesting journey because I didn't get it for a long time, and not that I've gotten it now, but at least I have that understanding of it now.
Yeah. Well, in that, I think it was it was Breathing Underwater, where he talked about that church really happens in the basement of the church and not in the auditorium.
Yeah.
Such a simple phrase, but so enlightening for me, because I just thought, yes, this is what is supposed to be happening if you're in a religious group.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be receiving this type of love and grace and unconditional love. And the only rule is to love.
Yeah. And there's no organization to it. That's the thing. It's all just no centralized organization. Whereas upstairs in the church, it's all about the hierarchy of the church. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the way that the Bible has been translated and retranslated. And I'm sure that you also grew up with it being said that the Bible was infallible, that it was straight from the breath of God. I have friends who still believe that today, despite the evidence that it has been translated to suit others' purpose.
Oh, yeah. We know all that. That's the thing. And the men who stood up in those pulpits and preached to us every Sunday either knew that or should have known that. But the fact that, and I think one of the professors at Bob Jones, or the teachers, they didn't really have professors, but one of the teachers at Bob Jones made a comment that, and he understood all this. We don't even have an original manuscript. All the translations have been translated imperfectly based on the political needs of the time. But you just have to accept that what we have in front of us is the literal interpretation of God's word. That's a cult. That is the definition of a cult.
That is a cult. Yes, absolutely. There is a great deal of freedom, I think, in being able to separate yourself from the constraints of religious community and patriarchy in that respect, and to realize that you can still be a spiritual person.
I think being a spiritual person, being a truly spiritual person, requires a rejection of all of that.
I would agree with you for sure. How do you practice faith or spirituality? Or you obviously are reading Rohr, so there's something compelling there. Yeah.
Yeah, like tomorrow morning at 4:30 in the morning, I'm going to go running with a friend. He's a former military officer himself. He's gay, he's in recovery, and we'll run 4 miles around this dry creek bed as the sun comes up over this 10,000 feet mountain right here. That is a spiritual experience to me, having that sense of community. And then like this morning, I went to a 12-step meeting at 5:30, and I was in a room of, just in the last 6 months since I moved here, a dozen or more people. 4 or 5 of them have become close friends, like brothers to me, because we all have this shared past. And that is spirituality, that connection, understanding that I don't have any idea what's beyond me, but there is something, and knowing that I feel that by connecting with people. And everything I was taught in fundamentalism is separation. That to me is sin. That separation. We are separate from everyone else on this planet because we have this religious creed. That's bigotry. And that's what I've had to reject in order to attain any sense of spirituality.
I've found it to be to beautiful to say that I feel connected to the air and
Yeah.
to the trees and to the clouds and to the moon,
Mhm.
just because I just have, I don't understand how it, even if God made every single thing and, in 7 days, and if you went that route, how could it not have been created to work together?
Right. I mean, it and how it happened, I care so little about that now. It's like in
Yeah.
this moment
Yeah.
right now, it can work together. It can be perfect, to use that word that we kind of started off like how we're getting away from. But,
Right.
and it's hard to say that when, I work with, I just left the courthouse this morning in a
Mm,
really trying to help some people with a really sad situation. So I'm
mm,
not about to tell them that the world is perfect. No
yeah.
way. But there is something harmonious. I'm in a place now where I get to recognize that and hopefully use what I've learned and experienced to help other people.
Well, I think that's wonderful. Um, You're such an interesting person, so
Well, thank you.
enjoyable to talk to. I know what I thought of while we were talking. You mentioned your upcoming book, which I don't know about. Do you want to
Okay.
share anything about what you've got coming up?
Yeah, one of the questions you had asked me was about the difference between writing memoir and fiction.
Yes,
And
yes.
which gives me more freedom. I mean,
Mm,
memoir to me is about people, and people have
mm,
lives, and lives are messy. A novel is about characters, and characters have a story arc that can be controlled, or is linear, more linear,
sure.
I should say. The story that I wanted to tell this time, I chose to write it as fiction, but it is somewhat autobiographical because it does end it begins where my memoir ended.
Okay.
We talk about religion, and I've heard this a few times from religious leaders. The Dalai Lama, for one, the only religion he practices now is kindness.
Mm,
But yeah, kindness is the only religion. And I look back and I read my memoir now, and one of the difficulties that I have with it is I wasn't always as kind as I wish I'd been. And I
mm,
just felt like the best way to do that going forward, I can be mean to some fictional characters, meaner than I can to actual real people.
yeah. Yeah.
So it is fictional. I didn't really want to write about some of the relationships that I had because they're very personal to me,
Mm,
people I'm
mm-hmm.
still friends with. So to create new characters out of composite characters I've known, I also talk at the end about recovery, and that is anonymity, as you know.
Mm,
So those fictional characters are based on composite stories that I've dealt with over the years that I'm familiar with. So
yeah.
my upcoming novel is called Trials of a Legal Junkie.
Mm,
And it's about a character that just can't seem to quit practicing law
uh-huh.
as much as he wants to, keeps coming back to it. But at the end, the epiphany is law is service. And
Mm,
this can be a path for someone.
yeah. It's also an opportunity to express kindness.
Yes, that's what I try to do with it.
Yeah.
Sometimes fall short, but yeah.
Well, I loved what you said about the Dalai Lama, that kindness is his religion. Doesn't it seem like it would be a whole lot simpler if everybody's religion was that?
Honestly,
Yeah, but no one asked us, right?
the irony is the only reason I started practicing kindness was because nothing else had worked for me.
Mm,
And I thought, well, why don't I just try this? And
yeah.
selfishly, I found out that the kinder I became, the more I got what I wanted, which was really love, affection,
Yeah.
companionship, community, and then along the way, admiration and respect. That came later. But kindness over time equals courage. It's not
Mm,
easy in the beginning, but the longer I go being kind, the more I realize it doesn't mean I'm a doormat. It doesn't
no.
mean I'm an idiot. I follow Majaya said, practice compassion, not
Mm,
idiot compassion.
yeah.
And that's true. Yeah, you just let people take advantage of you.
Yes, being walked over, walked on can be a consequence of not paying enough attention to
Yeah,
the
yourself.
type of kindness.
And
Yeah.
kindness is kindness to oneself as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And so I don't think I realized that you just recently moved from Atlanta to California. So you're in the San Diego area is what you said, right?
Used to live in San Diego. Now
Oh, okay.
I live in the Coachella Valley.
Are you enjoying that,
I'm
being
loving it.
there?
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
good.
loving it.
Good.
I miss my
Good.
friends. I have some wonderful relationships in Atlanta that I'm looking forward to reconnecting with in a few weeks. But yeah,
Great.
I love it here.
Great. Well, I'm glad. A question that I like to ask is, what would you go back and tell your younger self?
So apart from going back and saying, don't worry, you're on the right track and they're the
Yeah.
ones who are wrong and they will prove themselves wrong.
Mhm.
What I would tell myself is do not hand the reins of your life over to your ego, because every time you do, it's going to go off the
Mm.
rails.
Mm.
Now,
Mm.
would I have listened to my older self? I would be like, no, who's this old man? Quit
Yeah.
talking. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. But yeah, that's the key. I mean, ego gets a bad rap, but it's always there. It's an
Yeah.
illusion, as Rohr teaches, I think. But when you hand your life over to it and start serving your own ego, you're on a path to destruction.
Yes, that's what creates all the
Inauthenticity,
authoritarianism. Yeah,
authoritarianism. Yeah.
authoritarianism. That's the word I was looking for.
I know it was a really wonderful conversation. I really
Oh, great.
appreciated it. I think, we covered the liberation, the freedom. That's the most important part.
Yeah, I agree.
One of your first things you talked about exile. Faith in exile. It's interesting, that word faith. How many times did you hear, what is faith? Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen.
Mhm.
Hebrews 11:1. What does that mean? No, I mean, if that's the case, then faith is winning the lottery, because that's what I'm hoping for, and I have yet to see it.
Me too. Yeah. You know, faith like the size of a mustard seed is all you need.
What does
Did
that
you remember?
mean? Yeah.
What does that mean? I even had a necklace that had a mustard seed in it.
Yeah. And you know what, Laura? They don't know what it means either.
Yeah.
They just spout that because it's in the Bible and it's a glib answer they can say to shut you up. Faith is being okay with not having a clue what happens next.
Yeah.
That to me is faith. And they are not faithful. They call themselves people of faith because
Yeah.
they have to believe with absolute certainty that when they die, they're going to go to this weird heaven they've created.
Yeah.
And no, you don't know that you're going to do that. But to think that you have to know that, that's not faith. That's some weird guarantee.
It is. And it's also based on a lot of rules,
Mm-hmm.
which is, again, not faith.
Right.
So come on, we need to get these people with the program.
I've given up on that.
I know it's wishful thinking, but I practice yoga and really enjoy the meditative state,
Yeah.
and that's actually how I've been able to maintain some sanity. Is I sort of found some of my people, so to speak, and the opening up of the spiritual world and the ability to connect in so many different ways.
Yeah.
I think it's just, well, it's unfortunate if you don't get to experience some of that. You just can't ever get to that mindset, room to include that. My mother, she was the one, and it was probably from Nowen's words, who said, church can be sitting on my back porch talking with my friend or having a cup of tea. There's so much that's lost when we think church is in a building.
Yeah. For me, church for a long time was when I left New York and I was making it on my own for the first time in many years. I would take my dog, Xander and Willow, to the beach in Jacksonville. It's between St. Augustine and Ponte Vedra, and we would be the only ones there for a whole mile of beach. And that's how we spent our Sunday morning. And that to me will always be the holiest church I've ever been to.
Yeah. The ocean, the beach. Oh, yeah.
And the dog.
And the dogs. Yes, of course. Dogs go to heaven too.
To not have dogs there is hell. Like if there's a
That would
place
be
without
hell.
dogs, that's hell.
I agree with you. So let's talk about the 3 questions that are kind of the signature questions for the podcast. You don't have to answer all 3 if you don't have an answer. But what are you reading? What are you watching? And what are you listening to?
So reading, I'm in a book club here in Palm Springs, and we're reading Catcher in the Rye, which I had never read before. It's, Bob Jones wasn't on the reading list.
Sure.
Strangely enough, Mark Twain was, which I don't think they realized what they were letting me read when I started reading a lot of Mark Twain.
Yeah.
But I find I'm gravitating to sci-fi, which I never
Mm.
did as a kid, but I love it now.
Mhm.
I'm watching, I think Foundation is on Apple, Andor is on Disney. So I'm really liking the ancient themes of, what Joseph Campbell taught about. You see
Mm.
those especially in the George Lucas world. He was a big
Yeah.
influence, those
Yeah.
mythical themes. And then what I'm listening to lately, I just listen to a lot of music. My favorite DJ is in Nashville, Brian Norwood. He's got a bunch of
Oh,
mixes out. So I'm just going back through and listening to all of them. I just like his music. It's got a rhythm to it, but it's kind of, soothing and chill.
yeah. Yeah. That's great. Well, I have a problem with the one, what are you listening to? Because it's generally podcasts.
I hate to say this, but last year I was addicted to all the news and political podcasts,
Yeah.
and I haven't paid a bit of attention to the news since November 5th, 2024.
Good for you.
Yeah. I found I'm much happier, much more at peace. Once in a while I'll catch something, like release the Epstein files. I know what that
Yes.
means.
Yes.
But
Staying a little
a little
current.
bit, but not
Yeah.
immersed in it like I was.
Yeah. Well, my psychiatrist prescribed me no news. Um, and so actually maybe she said 30 minutes a day. I don't even,
I
I
think
might get 5, but
she probably said 3. I think 3 is good.
she probably said 3. Yeah. Yeah, I think she did. I should make that correction.
Well,
Um,
Foundation is interesting because it's based on the Isaac Asimov novels series that he wrote. And it's about this empire in a distant galaxy in time where every new emperor is a clone of the original emperor. And so 20
oh,
generations later, they're on like the 20th. And there are always 3 emperors alive at a time. One is like 30 years older than the next. And
okay.
that's Bob Jones University.
Wow.
It was Bob Jones Sr., Bob Jones Jr., Bob Jones III. They were all supposed to be clones of the original until my friend
Oh,
Bobby
wow.
Jones IV
Interesting.
came along, and he lives in quiet anonymity with his husband somewhere
Okay.
in the South.
He
Yeah.
broke the mold.
Yeah. He's one of my dearest friends today. I love that
That's
guy.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Well, thanks again. It's just really been a pleasure to talk to you and hear your story and feel some kinship, some camaraderie in our legalism and
Yeah. We have a
some
lot in
background.
common. And that's
Yeah.
spirituality is community and finding that
Yeah.
commonality in the background and being on the same path going forward.
Well, thanks again. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and
You
I'll look forward to
too.
seeing you in Atlanta.
Yeah. That'll be nice to meet you in person. Great.
Yeah, same. All right. Take care, Rich. All right. Bye. It was great to have you on, Rich. You're just a delight and so enjoyable to talk to you. Thank you for sharing your stories with us. And I'll look forward to the next time that we get to talk. Bravery isn't only medals and milestones. Sometimes it's choosing honesty and the in-between. If you're listening from a liminal space between faith and freedom, loyalty and truth, may Rich's story remind you you're not alone. Thanks for joining us on In the Margins. Have a great day. You've been listening to In the Margins. If this episode spoke to you, the best way you can support the podcast is by following, liking, and sharing it with someone who needs to hear it. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. And if you'd like to connect, I'd love to hear from you at podcastinginthemargins@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and remember, some of the best stories are found in the margins.